This is our IAA's chart delineation session, and I'm Jodie Forrest. I'll be doing it this week. For starters, I've had a full-time astrological practice since May of '83. I'm sort of a combination of an evolutionary astrologer and a modern psychological astrologer. I feel comfy doing both types of reading. I am an instructor here. Want to get in touch with me? That's my email. That's my phone number. I don't always answer my phone, so for the phone, texts are better. Email is best. And I know Teresa, but I don't know Carolyn and Asha Lily. Would you tell me a little bit about your where you are with astrology right now?
Yeah, I can go first. Can you hear me? You can go, Carolyn. Okay, thank you. So I've actually been in one or two sessions with you, Jodie, but it's been a while, and I just moved from Utah to Washington, so kind of multitasking here. While the class is going on, I'll probably have to leave. I studied for a couple of years at the FCEA, and it's course and University, and I'm covering Net 3 here at the IAA. So
Okay.
Okay. I'm kind of.
Is anyone else having a problem hearing Carolyn clearly?
Yeah, it's cutting out.
Carolyn, your phone's cutting out a bit.
I'll hand it over to Asha.
Okay.
In a nutshell, Jodie, Carolyn's one of the students. She's done, I think, have you done 1, 2, and 3, Carolyn? You have, haven't you? Nat 1, 2, and 3?
I'm not sure if she heard you.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure she's taken a break. That's the only thing.
Okay.
Because she's in the process of moving. But yeah, just in that sort of, I think, who was I think the last teacher she just had was Levita.
Okay.
All right. So I think they did chart delineation together.
Okay,
so,
good.
Yeah.
How about you, Asha Lily?
Yeah, I have been doing self-study for about 10 years, and I have had the pleasure of nearly finishing calculations, which has been interesting. And after Nat 5, I'll be finished with natal studies.
Okay.
Yeah, and then be moving on to some electives.
Okay, and Teresa, the other folks may not know you, so I've just realized I should ask you to introduce yourself too.
I think they all know me. Carolyn was in my, I think, Nat 1, 2, and 3 with me, or at least 2 and 3. And Asha, I've met at Astro Dice. So Asha, are you doing Nat 5 in the fall too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you both there, and I'm looking forward to it. I am sort of a general practitioner. I see clients. I do the big 3 types of readings. I do orrery and electional and relocation. And I teach and I tutor, and teaching is my favorite part of my weird job. Okay. Today, turn off your cell phone, and it's a good idea to do that at the beginning of a reading too. It's a good idea to ask the client to verify the birth data before you start the reading. And I just got a small lesson on that because I was casting a chart this morning when I was pretty sleepy and I used the wrong birth time. So always check your birth data. Make sure your client is comfortable in the room and feels like they have some control. You know, they can take breaks when they want to, they can ask questions, they've got water. If your voice is soft, you might need to speak up. It's a good idea to ask clients if they have time constraints. Tell them
Jodie,
about
can I
how long.
can I ask you a quick question? It's just an observation I just wanted to share. Um, when you said check birth time, birth data,
Mhm.
does anyone else have the phenomenon that anyone who doesn't know their birth time thinks they're born at 6 a.m.? Do you find that a lot? I think I'm born in the morning. I think it was around 6 o'clock. And I think
Yes.
if I had $1 for every person that said they think they're born at 6, I always go to them, you need to go and check, or, and encourage them to ring the hospital and get a birth time. And I think out of that 95%, some of them are actually born 6 o'clock, say 6 a.m. And I'm a bit shocked,
Sometimes it
but
happens.
I have to ask and ask and ask and ask. And I don't know what it is. But they'll come back and say, "Oh, you were right. It's 2:30 in the afternoon." And you go, "Yeah, it's slightly different." But anyway, I just wanted to see if that was just me. That's sorry about interrupting.
No,
Anyway.
it happens a lot. I do a lot of rectifications, partly for that reason. And I like rectifying charts, so it's kind of fun for me. But yes, indeed, people frequently don't know their birth times or don't realize how important it is. Or they asked mom and mom got their birth time confused with their older sisters. There can be a lot of wiggle room in birth times, so it's good to get documentation. I know some astrologers who will not do a reading unless you bring in proof of your birth time. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I can understand the impulse behind that. Um, at the beginning of a reading, ask why they have come in to see you today and let them talk about as long as they want. If you have time constraints yourself, cut them off after 20 minutes, half an hour. But people need to feel heard, and it's good for you to listen to them because you can be silently scanning for, are they afraid of me? Are they afraid of the reading? How much stress do they seem to be under right now? Are they in kind of emotionally raw at the moment? Are they nervous? Are they tired? It's just a good idea to get some kind of handle on who they are and how they are doing right at the moment. Also, I ask about their level of knowledge of astrology, and because that will affect where you aim the reading. It's important that the reading is accessible for your client, so try not to speak Chaldean, Egyptian, Greek, and use jargon, because they will have problems with it. I think it's okay to give people the jargon name for something if you make it kind of silly and then you immediately explain it. It's a good idea to work on developing simple, brief ways to explain the meanings of each planet, each house, and each sign, like bumper sticker meanings. You use those to introduce a more detailed analysis of the sign or the planet or the house. If they have Mars in the third, I might say you have the god of war in the house of communication, say. And that's all it takes to give them a quick look at what they're going to be hearing about. And they feel more comfortable because they know what you're going to be talking about next. However, do not ever talk down to a client. Never frighten them. Emphasize that they have free will. People have come into me having had readings from other people, and one person said, "Your Saturn return is going to last about forever." And another astrologer said, "Oh, you've had a hell of a life, and haven't you? And it isn't over yet." So don't say negative things to clients. They're there because they're interested in astrology and or because they want some insight. And scaring them is just wrong. The first rule of doing readings is like the first rule of medicine. First, do no harm. Okay, I already talked about body language. If you have trouble reading people's body language, I suggest looking it up online or getting a couple of books. Or talk to a friend of yours who's a therapist, because they get trained to watch for body language. If when you're changing sound files, ask if they want a break. Say so if you need one. You're not a machine. I think it's fine to model yourself on another astrologer to begin with while you're figuring out how you want to work. The main thing, clients don't need to know everything you know about astrology, and they don't need to know everything you know about their chart in order for you to do a good, effective, helpful reading. Don't overload them. Even though they'll have the recording, if they leave overwhelmed, they're somewhat less likely to listen to the reading. And we're about to go into the next thing, which is what stands out the most for you when you look at a chart for the first time. That's one of your preparation things. Pick up the chart and just what seems to hit you in the eye first. Also, do some thinking. Some astrologers read the entire birth chart. Some astrologers just ask why the client is there, and they address the issues that the client mentions in the reading, referring to the chart, but they do not do an entire reading. With some trial and error, you'll figure out what works best for you. It's good to be flexible according to the client's preferences. And it's a good idea to have lots of different tools and techniques in your astrology toolbox. So I encourage people to study with as many different astrologers as they possibly can for that reason. Well, this week I decided not to waste time having you guess who the chart is. And this is Timothy Chalamet, which I think would be how he says his last name. He's half French, half American. French father, American mother. And he's an actor. Have any of you seen him in anything he's done?
Yeah, I love him. He's great.
Yeah, he's an excellent young actor.
He sounds
My
familiar.
favorite movie is June.
Yeah? And he was
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
he was in both Dunes and A Beautiful Boy, and I think the one that broke him was Call Me by Your Name. And he was in Little Women, and he's been in several others. So he's probably one of the up-and-coming young actors. The first thing that hits you in the eye about his chart, anybody?
Fifth house.
Yeah, definitely. That is an enormous fifth house with an awful lot of planets. Jupiter and Venus are not actually in that house, and Jupiter is in the stellium just because it touches the sun, but it's not in Capricorn. So this is a rather large stellium in Capricorn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets in Capricorn and an angular second. So we have a very Capricorn sort of person. A lot of drive in general, and a lot of creative drive in particular. Is there anything else about the Capricorn stellium in the fifth that you notice or want to point out?
The Neptune and Mercury are very closely conjunct.
Yes, they are. They are partile. So I imagine Mr. Chalamet shares some of the absent-mindedness that we Mercury-Neptune aspect people tend to have. But only so far, I'm sure, because he has to memorize lines. I think that Neptune can be a boon in the charts of actors because it helps you step outside of your own personality and step into somebody else's. And that's what actors do. They temporarily suspend their own identity and pretend they are somebody else with varying degrees of plausibility and success. And they often use their bodies as part of it. I think it was Stanislavski who said the body was the instrument through which you are acting. It's how you are playing a role. So if you have a prominent Neptune, you're kind of used to temporarily stepping outside your mind, your own mind, of whether you're meditating, whether you're in a creative trance. You're comfortable temporarily turning off the volume on your waking outer three-dimensional ascendant bound self and stepping into a role someone else. It probably would help him with voice work. And in some of the roles he's done, I'm going to be talking about some of the voice work that he's done. He played Bob Dylan, and I am trying to remember the name. No Way Home? No, Direction Home. That's it. And with the addition of a prosthetic nose to imitate Mr. Dillon's, he was a plausible Dillon. Capricorns are hard workers, and he found out about the movie right at the beginning of the COVID epidemic. What do you think he spent the COVID epidemic doing? He wanted the role. He researched Bob Dylan. He learned everything he could about Bob Dylan. He listened to all of Bob Dylan's music. He learned to play the guitar. He learned to play the harmonica. He talked to people who had known Dylan. He didn't meet Dylan himself. I'm sure he would have loved to. But he met an awful lot of other people that Dylan knew. So he made an intense study of Bob Dylan. I think he might have started working with dialogue coaches then, because Dylan has a particular accent and a rather nasal voice that Chalamet needed to learn how to imitate in order to be plausible. He also took singing lessons. So a lot of people would have said, I'll get in touch with him after the pandemic. Nothing's happening now. This is not what this young man did. He threw himself into preparation so that he had 3 to 5 years, sometimes he says 3, sometimes he says 5, preparing for the role. And I'm sure it added to the verisimilitude of his performance. Anything else you notice about the chart right off the bat?
He's got his sun and his ascendant trine. That seems like that seems like a real positive thing. How others see him and he sees himself are probably pretty congruent.
Yeah, I think sun ascendant positive aspect frequently gives you some charisma. And also the sun in the sun's own house to some extent. So with that enormous stellium and with the trine to the ascendant, I imagine you notice when he walks into a room, and you would notice even if he weren't a famous actor. So yeah, I think when we have a good aspect between the sun and the ascendant, it's relatively easy for us to communicate who we are to the outside world, to be ourselves in the outside world. This is a bowl chart. Everything is in approximately half of the chart. Some people would say the bowl starts at Chiron or the bowl starts at the nodes. I don't usually work with Chiron, but I put it in for these sessions because I know a lot of you do. So when you have a bowl chart, what does that mean, anybody?
There's
I
a
can't
focus in
remember.
one area.
Yeah, it's a focus on that half of the chart. They can be very focused on the occupied half of the chart, and the more occupied it is, the more they focus on it. We spend most of our time where we have the most planets. So he spent an awful lot of time in his 5th house. And the other thing about bowl charts is that the person is trying to learn more about the empty houses and to get into them and to do things with them. There's a drive of, I kind of need to explore the other part of the world. They might not phrase it like that. And I think he has probably spent some time doing this. And actors work very intensively for a little while, and then they often don't have a whole lot to do until the next big role that they want to go for. So I imagine he said he prepared for the Dylan role for 5 years, and he got to be Dylan for 2 or 3 months while the movie was being shot. And I don't think he regrets it at all. And I am so looking forward to seeing this. One little tidbit that you wouldn't know unless you had looked up his asteroids, which I doubt you've done. The asteroid Hermes is partile on his, I don't think it's partile, but it's right close to. Okay, is that so? This is the guy yeah, Hermes is on his ascendant with a 23-minute orb. Minute. Hermes in mythology, as you'll know, is considered androgynous. He doesn't really, the planet doesn't exactly have a gender. And it's been interesting to me that because Timothy played a gay person in a couple of his first big roles, a lot of people think he's gay or bi. And I have no idea, and I don't think it matters, but it just fascinates me that with the ascent, he's emblematic of Hermes on the ascendant. If you take a look at, he's a pretty skinny guy. So I think that the Mercury, the aspect that Hermes makes to his ascendant is quite powerful, and it's an interesting coincidence, if nothing else. He's also bilingual. He grew up speaking both French and English. So Mercury ruling his ascendant definitely got put to use. The sun is ex conditione, the moon is in haze, Saturn is ex conditione, if you're looking at sex. So this strengthens his moon. When you look at the dignities, the moon has +3. The most dignified planets in the chart are Mars and Jupiter. The least dignified are the Sun and Mercury. And we will talk some about how he's using that Mars and Jupiter. Here's his chart again. I like to intersperse it. Look at this. All his planets are fast. I don't usually bring in this much traditional material, but given that I'm talking at the IAA, I wanted to bring it in for today. Every single one of his planets is fast. So he probably, also with a Mercury ruled ascendant, is faster than the average Capricorn to do things, period. And I am not sure if it's a blessing or not to have all of your planets fast. I have a client who has all of her planets stationary. And it's these extremes that are really interesting. And the more clients you see, the more you get to ask them about it. So he's quick on his feet, probably quick in every other way. Midpoints are interesting. It takes a long time to look at a whole long midpoint list. First, I'm assuming you all know what midpoints are. Okay, good. Midpoint trees can let you know which planets are quite affected by midpoints, so you might want to emphasize them a little more in your interpretation. The moon has a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I would have expected a little more at the midheaven, a little more at Venus, but the work he does is somewhat lunar. You have to suss out the character. And the moon rules the body on kind of a cellular level, a kinesiology level. And I think if your moon is pretty busy in your chart, it helps you memorize things. It helps you with muscle memory. And also it can help you be a mimic. It can help you imitate, which is very useful for an actor. The way you read these, if you haven't spent much time in them, is that the moon is conjunct his Neptune midheaven, midpoint. It's also conjunct his Uranus midheaven, midpoint. So the first thing I do with midpoints is go through and count who has the most. And then I go through and look at the conjunctions, especially to Sun, Moon, Ascendant, and Midheaven. You can, with the advent of computers, suddenly we can go as deep into the weeds as we want to with astrology. And you'll be deciding what techniques you want to use in your own practice. And this may not be one that you're interested in at all, but I think it can be quite valuable if you are interested. And here is the natal chart again. Now, all that Capricorn has ambition. And people have talked to him about his ambition. Do you want to be one of the famous actors in the world? Do you want to win this award and that award? And they talk to him about it a lot, actually, and his standard response is, I just want to be one of the great actors. I want to be a great actor. Leaving awards out of it, he says, I want to get great at the craft of acting. That's a fifth house response. I want to master my creative daemon, my creative muse. I want to get very, very, very good at this creative craft I have chosen for my work. And with all that Capricorn, I predict that he probably will go down in history as one of our greatest actors. As for relationships, he is dating Kylie Jenner. That's all I know. Relationships are important because the ruler of this Capricorn stellium is in his seventh house. My experience of Saturn in the seventh is that it slows you down. Saturn is sort of like the cosmic speed bump in a birth chart. You cannot race through the house that contains natal Saturn too fast and not knowing what you're doing. It's like trying to run a car at a fast speed over a speed bump. You definitely get shaken up. So Saturn is meant to slow us down and take our time in the particular part of our chart that Saturn occupies. So it probably would be better for this guy not to make long-term commitments until after his Saturn return. I don't think I'd say that to a client because it sounds too directive, but I would talk to them about the benefit of Saturn slowing down your experience. You figure out who you are, you figure out what you want in a relationship. And he's looking for people, I suspect, with a drive to accomplish something meaningful to them and with integrity and responsibility and who are not clingy. That would be my guesses looking at Saturn here. It's making a loose conjunction to the moon. And that Pisces moon conjoined Saturn. Saturn and Pisces are pretty different. Saturn, you can think of in some ways as the spine of the chart, the backbone of the chart. This is where the person needs to become a mature, responsible adult and move their locus of control to within themselves and take responsibility for their lives and operate with integrity. So we all go over some speed bumps because most of us, when we're kids, try to charge through the house that contains Saturn way too fast, or we ignore it, or we don't realize how much work we have to do there. So if it's in the seventh house, he might have gotten some bumps or bruises when relationships did not work as well as he wished they would. The other thing that will help him is feeling that he doesn't need a relationship the way somebody who is having a serious asthma attack needs oxygen. As long as he feels, relationships are great, but if I end my life not having had a permanent forever mate, that's okay. I will not feel emotionally deprived if I don't end up in a long-term committed relationship. It's feeling emotionally independent. Physically independent, nobody has to pay his way. Emotionally independent, he's not needy. And by that time, there's a native caution where our Saturn is. So you could see him start to get involved in a relationship and stopping himself and going, okay, what's wrong with this person? What is the reality of this person? What do I need to do to get to know them really, really, really well? And something that I think Capricorn and Saturn both do is they get into a situation and they can be very quick to think, what could go wrong here? They get into an airplane, they look where the exit seats are and count the number of rows to the exit seats. There's always a feeling of what could go wrong here. And Capricorn is trying to protect against what could go wrong. And a lot can go wrong in relationships. So he would make a mistake by just saying, okay, I'm shutting the door on that. It's been too hard. It's been too difficult. which Saturn might sometimes want to do, but that eighth house Pisces moon needs a partner, in my opinion. I think the eighth shows relationships that are deep and that they're so deep they mess with our psyche. Sexuality is often a part of some of those relationships. If you've been sleeping with someone for 6 or 8 months and suddenly they decide that they are moving to Nicaragua and they do not ask you to go with them, you have a shock. If your best friend of 10 years gets a fabulous job in Nicaragua and wants to go, you might be very sad that she's leaving and you talk about visiting, but you don't feel betrayed as you might be if your sexual partner up and decides to leave the country without you. So I suspect he may need more intimacy than he feels comfortable getting in the early stages of the relationship, or until he's figured out some Saturn lessons in his seventh house. If I could put a sign on the door of his seventh house, it would be serious inquiries only. Don't mess with me. This is someone who's capable, I think, of, some very deep attachments to somebody, once that he has found the right person. Okay. Somebody tell me something about Pluto on the IC, please.
Well, it's at the very beginning of Sag, so that's a critical spot, right?
Mhm. Definitely.
Turbulence at home, in the early home life, growing up within the family.
He may have felt that the family had a certain desire to be controlling, either behaviorally or emotionally, with Pluto there. One of the parents was psychologically complex and intense. And when you become a teenager, there are often some power struggles with such a parent. If we imagine the best possible expression of Pluto in Sag on the IC that we can, and then the most horrible expression of it than we can, his own experience of it was somewhere between those two extremes. So I think the fourth tends to refer more to dad than mom, but it's also the whole family atmosphere, and it's the ancestors. It's the house of our ancestors and everything we have inherited through them. So if we paint an excellent picture, Dad might have been the next Carl Jung with profound understanding of the human psyche, extreme emotional intelligence, and an ability to let kids unfold in their own natural ways. If Sagittarius, I think, wants to be fair, wants to be just. And Sagittarius needs life to have meaning. So if whoever this represents in his background started to feel that life is meaningless, that person will probably have become pretty unhappy. We don't know if that went on in his family background. The other planet sitting here is Jupiter. So, there were gifts that he got by his particular family. Being bilingual is one of them, certainly. And his mother was a dancer and a real estate agent. His father worked for, I don't remember if it was the UN or UNICEF, but he edited their French publications. And Timothy spent every summer in Lyon, France, and then the school year in New York City with his parents. He went to a performing arts high school and then had a year or so of college and decided that he wanted to join the drama program at Columbia, which is in New York City. Okay. I'm looking for any notes here. He also has an emotional need to spend some time in an altered state of consciousness. The drive of Pisces is to experience yourself as something more, something greater, something more mysterious, something other, something numinous, something magical, something that is part of divine intelligence or divine consciousness or whatever you might want to call it. So meditation has two parts. You blur the waking personality in part one. You turn on your answering machine before you meditate. In part two, you turn your attention inward and observe your consciousness. There are people who will go for part one, they numb their personality, they put it on hold temporarily, they disengage from it without necessarily doing part two in a constructive way. So also, when you see a large fifth house, this is someone who likes to have fun. This is someone who likes to relax. This is someone who I'm sure is interested in more creativity than just acting and was able to learn to play the guitar and the harmonica well enough to do Bob Dylan's music. So there's a lot of talent here, but he also just likes to have a good time. So, making sure he has a range of pleasures will be important so he doesn't get stuck on just one. For a relationship to last, the person will need to be a competent adult, but the person will also need to be soulful, have a big heart, have a streak of mysticism, understand that sometimes Timothy just needs to be alone and breathe, or however he does his getting into an altered state. And the person needs to have powerful emotions. Emotions are sometimes not Capricorn's forte. So an emotionally fluid partner might be very good for him. If we look at dispositor chains, Jupiter is the final dispositor for just about everything. This Capricorn stellium is ruled by Saturn, which is ruled by Jupiter. The moon is ruled by Jupiter. Venus is ruled by Saturn, which is ruled by Jupiter. So that's his final dispositor, and that's a strong planet in its own sign and angular. So I think having a strong Jupiter in the fourth makes you resilient. You tend to bounce back more easily than other people do. Anything else about Timothy?
The pot of fortune in the 10th.
Well, the part of fortune in the 10th indicates that a career using his Mercury, using his mind, communicating, would be a good career for him. Also, Venus rules that midheaven. And I think actors have to be pretty articulate. They have to know how to use their voice. And they typically get a lot of vocal training with dialogue coaches and dialect coaches to reproduce people's accents as faithfully as they can. I think his career has probably earned him quite a bit of money. So I don't think, unless he's spendthrift, which is kind of dubious, looking at all that Capricorn, I don't think finances, a financially lucrative career is going to be a problem for him. It may be as he gets older that he'll decide he wants to write screenplays or he wants to direct. he wants to get involved with some other production part of making movies. And
Jodie,
yes,
can I ask you a question?
sure.
Going back to, I know you're about to put your Placidus chart up, but looking at
No,
Timothy's
that's
chart,
Jodie's box too.
just for everyone here, using a Placidus house, you can see that, he does have Mercury ruling the second house.
Mhm.
However, if this was a whole sign chart, that would be a Venus rulership, which would put his Venus in the sixth house. Now, how do you think that might affect his resources versus the fact that Mercury being in the fifth with Mars, Neptune, and all of his creative stuff, but all of a sudden it's thrown it across into the sixth house? How do you, and a different ruler on the cusp? How do you see that being, or how would you interpret that differently? Because they do throw completely different views of how you would interpret it.
Sag, Cap, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. Well, I don't
Uh,
work very much with whole sign charts.
no, neither do I.
Want the actual midheaven and the actual
Yeah.
ascendant. I understand it can seem sort of like a blueprint for the chart. And for people who use whole sign houses, the more he develops Venus skills, creative skills and people skills,
Hmm.
the easier he is to get along with, the more likely he is to find the right work, find work that he enjoys, and to get along well with people on the set. Actors can be very temperamental. I understand that the late Val Kilmer was extremely hard to work with. And at the end of, I think it was when he played Batman, I don't remember which of his movies it was. It might have been The Doors. When they shot the last scene, the director is supposed to have screamed, "Now somebody get that SOB off of my set." And he was the lead in the movie. So I'm quite sure that it affected how many roles he got, because if word gets around when you're nasty and difficult to work with, word also gets around if you're pleasant and easy to work with.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious because it's one of those things that I know we teach both the traditional methods, and I know, for example, I've been watching the Nat ones are very strongly related around that traditional, education, as well as then they start touching on the Placidus. But you go through both sides. It's a very interesting balance because they are two different systems,
Yeah.
modern and traditional. So I was just curious as to your take on it, but I'm a little bit like you. I've come from a background where I really sort of had a look at different house systems and chose to use Placidus. But so it's a little bit like whether you choose to use Vedic. They all work. I suppose that's the thing. Anyway, I do have to run, but I'm really enjoying this. But I'm going to watch it back later.
Okay,
All
Lee,
right.
have
Thanks
a
very
good
much.
afternoon or evening, or what time is it where you are? Okay,
You're
he's off.
muted.
I am
See
muted.
you
Sorry.
later.
Thanks very much. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think that was a good question because I was also trying to picture it in whole sign in my mind a little bit too. And I always find the nodes interesting. For some reason, I feel very interested in the nodes. So seeing that his north node is Libra and south node is Aries, it looks like his path is to become more focused on others and not quite as much on himself, perhaps.
Yeah, focused on the arts and relationships,
Mhm.
moving into there. He came into the world, I think, having seen a lot of difficult things and developing a lot of strength. South Node in Aries in the eighth. He also came into the world ready to wrestle bears with 5 planets in Capricorn. An awful lot of Earth in this chart, and followed, I think, 2 in fire, 3 in water, 1 in air. But the primary signature is a whole lot of Earth. And it's good to look at your chart in many different house systems and look at the charts of people quite close to you in many different house systems and see which one consistently seems to feel like more like the person whose chart you're looking at. I wish house systems are a big part of astrology that I think we will have. I'm not sure what to call it other than differences of opinion about which house to use. And I'm not sure, I don't think there's any one right or wrong house system. Different ones often have different uses. Okay, this is not my chart, although I frequently people call me Jodie Foster. I'm not. I'm Jodie Forrest. This is Jodie Foster. I hope Luke heard that before he left, because I'm not going to spend the entire, I'm not going to delineate my own chart. We're practicing on other people's. Okay, what strikes you about Ms. Foster right off the bat?
All her stuff is like in 3 different groupings.
Yeah, that's a splay chart. I'm not sure if in some house systems that might put planets in other houses, it might turn into a bowl chart, but in Placidus, it's a splay. So that would indicate 3 huge major areas of interest in her life, and there sort of have been. Acting, now she's also directing. And she has a degree in literature from Yale, and her French is fluent. She has a French-speaking part in a movie coming up soon. So acting, directing, maybe the third will be producing, maybe the third is languages. I don't know. One could ask what the third one might be. That Jupiter is pretty strong. And so is Saturn. What we have a mutual reception in here. Can anybody tell me what it is? Mutual reception by sign. Hello, Matthew.
Hi.
I'm asking people to find the mutual
Is
reception
that
by sign in
the
this chart.
sun Mars?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. The sun is in Mars's sign, and Mars is in the sun's sign. So that's
The
one
8th and 12th.
that pretty much all goes back to this mutual dispositorship. And Saturn disposits itself and Jupiter disposits itself. So that sort of repeats, in a way, what we're seeing with the splay chart, because there's a big chunk of dispositorship here, and then 2 more chunks there. What else strikes you?
Venus is retrograde. That's kind of
Yes, it
interesting
is.
too. And I believe Jodie is lesbian, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So
She's married to a woman.
that's interesting.
Yeah. She had 2 kids with a former partner. I don't know who was the mother who bore them, but she has a couple of kids that she's quite fond of, and I don't know if they live with her and her current partner or not. They are, because I don't know how old they are, I'm not able to give a good guess. But she's enjoyed having children. And at this rate in her career, she can pretty much pick and choose what she wants to do. She's gotten excellent reviews as a director and an actress. Very talented. She started doing TV commercials at age 3. Mom was a stage mom and was quite ambitious for her. She got the lead role in Taxi Driver when she was 12. So she's been acting all of her life. She literally grew up on a stage or in front of the camera. Water is her primary element, followed by earth, followed by one in air and one in fire. Southern hemisphere emphasis, with the southeast and the southwest quadrants having equal points, at least the way I add them up. She's a very private person, and I can understand that. You have probably heard of that John Hinckley, who tried to assassinate Reagan, did so because he was obsessed with Jodie Foster, and he thought that if he assassinated the president, it would make him on the same level as she is for fame. He was a pretty disturbed person. He got a total of 7 different psychiatric diagnoses. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and the laws about what you need to do or be or say to qualify for that have been changed since then. So I think, especially if I had 4 planets in a sensitive water sign and a 12th house sun, I would be pretty rattled by the John Hinckley situation. When she testified in court, she had to. It was on closed camera, and she never looked at him, never spoke to him, answered questions as briefly as possible. If you want an interview with Jodie Foster, you have to sign a paper saying you will not bring up John Hinckley in any way, period. And if somebody tries it in an interview, she gets up and walks out. And good for her, I say. So I think it may be difficult for people with a whole lot of water to have that much of a public identity. But I think she's managed to keep her private life and her personal life pretty well separated. Okay. This is someone else who needs to spend some time in an altered state of consciousness, hopefully in a constructive way. That's one of the reasons she needs a lot of time alone and needs a private life. The sun is generally not you're generally not an extrovert if you have a 12th house sun. There are exceptions to everything. But I think that adds to the intense privacy. Okay, someone talk to me about the other stellium with her moon, please.
Mutable Earth Virgo. And that moon is pretty close to, well, 5 degrees from Uranus. That's not too close or too far. And 9th house, that's interesting too.
4 planets in Scorpio and a moon-Pluto conjunction. So very Scorpionic energy. Well, she insisted on getting a college education. She got into Yale. She's quite bright. And I imagine if at some point in her career she wanted to teach acting, she'd probably be a pretty good teacher. But so far, it seems her heart has been in either acting or directing. When your moon is in Virgo, you have an emotional need for personal growth. That's a big emotional need. I must improve myself. I must better myself somehow. But you also tend to see in extreme detail everything you think is wrong with you, just as much as everything you think is right with you. So I think one of the necessary steps for having a Virgo moon and using it well is to develop unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional self-regard. Don't withhold approval until the person feels that she's perfect, which is probably the secret goal of Virgo moons. But nobody is. So accepting herself as she is, liking herself as she is, not criticizing herself, not beating herself up are good steps for her to take. This Jupiter
And that-
opposing the moon will probably help. Sorry, Teresa, was that you?
Yeah, I was just about to say that exact opposition.
It's partile, so it's quite strong. Moon Uranus, she has an emotional need for independence. Moon Pluto, she has a powerful unconscious. And I suspect it gets involved in her waking life and her acting life. And she draws from a whole lot of depth, I think, to do her acting jobs. Everything I've seen her in, she has been stupendous. And it will also help her, I think, get into the psyche of her character to have a Moon-Pluto conjunction, because you are fascinated with the human psyche, all of it, all the depths of it, if you have Moon-Pluto, and there's a need to look at the depths of yours. I think when you have Pluto strongly configured with a personal planet, every now and then, the Pluto archetypal script of somebody who is too naive, falling into a bad place for a while, falling into their own unconscious, falling into something like their own personal hell. And it may take a while to climb back out. So powerful emotions, a lot of self-analysis, and Sagittarius rising probably helps quite a bit for not falling into the unconscious and having some trouble getting out. But there may be times when she periodically has to work on herself to understand her emotions better, especially her emotions. Mercury and Venus are in the middle of this rolling stellium. So in order to do a good job with her sun, it's as if she needs to become a living incarnation of Mercury in Scorpio, of Venus in Scorpio, and of Neptune in Scorpio, all at the same time, not just her sun in Scorpio. The more she sort of acts like an amoeba and uses pseudopods and brings these planets into her essence and learns how to use them, the better. In order for her to be sane and stay sane, she needs to develop her mind. She needs to develop creativity and an ability to form relationships, and she needs to develop some ability to step outside of herself and feel the force, we could say, some regular meditative-like activity. I hope she does some writing. I think something she wrote would be particularly interesting. So that's why I've been hoping for screenplays or novels. If we go a little farther, Moon is slow. Mars is slow. So it will take her time to work through everything she's feeling. Slow moons just take longer to process. Sun and Mercury are fast. I think that's probably an advantage to a planet to be fast instead of slow. Venus is retrograde. And at some point in her life, by secondary progression, Venus turned direct. So if I were doing a transits, progressions, and arcs reading for her, I would want to pull out the ephemeris and see when her Venus went direct, because that can be a turning point with that planet. It's as if it comes out of a certain amount of isolation in your psyche and isolation from the outside world. and steps out and becomes more noticeable, becomes more visible. And it may have something to do with the extreme acting talent. Sometimes retrograde planets correspond to some kind of serious talent that develops rather individually because, again, the planet is not much in contact with the rest of the chart and not much in contact with the rest of the world until it turns direct. And Jupiter is stationary. It rules her chart and it's in its own sign and it's stationary. So good. I think this will help her deal with some of the scorpionic episodes of her life. Uranus is stationary, helping her be independent and being her own person. Probably helps her reject roles she doesn't want. And Pluto is stationary, so turning up the volume on the intensity. The Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Neptune are all fast. Neptune's being fast, I think, has the effect of it getting more involved in that stellium, sort of tugging on the sleeves of the other planets until it gets to the Sun and saying, hey, we need some quiet time. We need to just be and breathe for a while. Okay. On the other hand, the most dignified planet in her chart is Saturn. So there's a lot of strength in planets where you might not necessarily think that you would find it. Followed by the Sun, strong Sun. And that's a good thing. You need to draw on your Sun for acting. I'm sure you draw on all of your planets eventually, but you need to have a pretty clear sense, in my opinion, of where you end and where the character begins to be a good actor. And the strong Sun gives a strong sense of self, and the stationary Neptune makes it easier for her to shed who she is and take on somebody else's persona. Interestingly enough, the moon has no dignity. However, where am I with the aspect trees? It still gets involved with the chart by these midpoints that it affects. And we need and use all of our planets. I think one advantage, it's also a disadvantage to a not very dignified moon, is if you have to override your feelings and get something done, it's probably easier than it would be if you have the moon in Cancer and it aspects everything else in your chart and it's very well dignified. But I think she can probably compartmentalize a little bit. Venus ruled midheaven. Venus ruled sixth house. So it's not surprising that she has a creative career. Not surprising at all. South Node conjunct Saturn. She arrived on the planet a very strong person. She was born strong. Whether that's an inheritance from a long line of her ancestors, or whether it's a result of past lives, nobody can say for sure. But either way, she has reflexes about being strong and some reflexes about being solitary and about being practical. So I rather doubt she's going to find a whole lot of people out there on the planet who are as strong as she is. She may have been in situations where her survival wasn't necessarily assured. And this kid went to work for her family, earning money from age 3 with a ambitious stage mom. Now, if we look at the North Node in the 8th house, this is interesting, especially when we think about that Scorpio stellium. What the souls, the psyches, the ego's major lesson for this lifetime is scorpionic. It's making your unconscious conscious and coping with it as you do. It's exploring your deep unconscious. It's deciding what you feel about the instinctual world, which includes death and dying and sexuality. So it's not the lightest of houses, but when your North Node is in Leo, I suspect she did not have a whole lot of fun. And that learning to relax, learning to let go, learning not to take herself so seriously, all these things will be very, very good for her. And it may take her a while to get there. I think she could easily be a workaholic because that's the reflex. It's Saturn. It's a strong Saturn. Let's get things done. And also being efficient, being practical, being strong, being a good provider is all part of her self-esteem, which may make it difficult to relax. If I could just wave a wand, I would make sure that she got a long vacation every year and spent it doing whatever she had always wanted to do that she thought was silly and would make her laugh, because it will help her. Laughter is extremely healing. It's good for us. Her creative energy, her creative ability is also helping with that Leo North Node, and she's performing all the time. She may be a little scared about this house with Mars here, but it's part of her chart to explore it and to take advantage of that mutual reception between the Sun and Mars and to form really deep bonds. Okay, if we look at Chiron as a kind of wound, actually I think wounds show up in the chart with Chiron and Pluto and Saturn, all three. But if we look at Chiron as a wound in the chart, a sort of this life situational wound, what might that have been?
Mother.
It might have been mom,
Siblings.
might have been siblings. And she was bright. She had taught herself to read by the time she was 3. She started talking at 9 months, and frequently very intelligent children get bullied. So that may have been a problem, or she may have felt unable to speak her mind freely at different parts and different junctures in her life. Communicating, reading, writing, speaking, listening, taking photographs, doing things with media will always lift her spirits. And getting better at the work that she does will also lift her spirits. Okay, anything else about Ms. Foster?
Were her Venus and Mars squared?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
That's a very tight Venus-Mars square. Any Venus-Mars contact, I think, heightens somebody's sexuality and makes exploring one's sexuality important. It's already important as a Scorpio. But the Venus-Mars relationship, the Venus-Mars dialogue just heightens sexuality in a person. And it also causes sometimes a little bit of confusion. When am I saying, come here, like Venus? And when am I saying, go away, like Mars? Any planet that makes an aspect to Venus gets configured into that person's relationship needs. So we know that she needs somebody who's quite intense, Scorpio, who has a mystical streak, Neptune, gentle, compassionate, is smart and is curious and can keep up a good conversation with her. That's essential. And can join the sun, somebody with charisma and a certain amount of personal presence, I suspect might be needed to stay in the ring with her. And if we go up to Mars in the 8th, no cowards. One of the quickest ways to lose her is to chicken out in some fundamental way.
No tacos for her.
Yeah,
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
that's okay. Anybody else see anything in this chart they'd like to talk about? Well, here are the midpoint trees. 5 off of Uranus, 4, 4, 4, 4. It looks like the winner of the midpoint contest would be Uranus, which lets us as astrologers know that that planet is more important in her chart than we might think.
That would point towards her independence and
Yes.
stuff, right?
Absolutely. Her independence, her willingness to break the rules, her willingness to innovate, all those things. And she's broken the rules about her sexuality. And I don't mean rules as in commandments or musts. I just mean the majority of the population is heterosexual. And this country, at least, is in the middle of trying to figure out which way we're going to go as a nation about that. About giving gay people the same rights that the rest of us have.
What is Munakara? I don't think I've heard that word before.
Well, I had to look it up too.
Okay.
I think it's a Vedic term. It's Hindu, and it means that the planets that are Munakara have got some kind of difficult relationship with their sect light. So they may try to do what they're supposed to do, but they have a tendency to trip over their feet. I do not remember what the difficult relationship with the sect light was. There were all these steps for figuring it out. But it's, I guess in Vedic, it would be another way to think of a planet as maybe not ex conditione, but still having a little bit more trouble than we might think. Okay. North node, midheaven, midpoint is on the moon. So that means that by doing her work on herself and by doing her work in the world, she is feeding her moon too.
And that is exact, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
0. Very, very, very tight. So that's an important midpoint. It's probably the most important midpoint here. Just because it's exact. But so are the Mars Chiron. No, that's an opposition. Mars midpoint opposes the sun. And that's exact. So to me, that speaks to not letting wounds that she may have incurred, especially in early life, stop her from doing what she needs to do and being who she needs to be. Developing some courage, developing bravery. If you have a Sun Mars square, you need to be able to at least look assertive. Your bark needs to be, your bark is probably worse than your bite. If your bark is worse than your bite, you may not have to bite. That's sort of how to work with the Mars aspect. And I noticed she's become very good at boundaries. Like she will not talk about Hinckley in interviews, period. And she insists on maintaining a very private life. She has never revealed who the father of the two children she and her partner at the time, had. And I suspect she never will. And Scorpio can be pretty good at keeping secrets. The Saturn-Pluto midpoint is conjoined Mercury. So powerful Mercury, we already knew that. And the North Node moon midpoint is conjoined Mars. And so is the Uranus North Node midpoint. Mars midheaven midpoint conjoins Pluto. Mars part of fortune midpoint is on Uranus. Jupiter midheaven midpoint is on her ascendant. So you can read these as well as I can. And I think the main thing with midpoint trees is they let you know which midpoints are the busiest in somebody's chart. And that might give you a somewhat different picture than the one you were already using. You know, it's another technique, it's another bit of information. You may never use them in your own practice, but it's good to know how. Anything else about Jodie? Okay, from here, we can do a bit more chart delineation with another chart. We have 8 minutes, or I can open it up for whatever questions you want to ask about astrology, period. You know, I'm here to be a source of what knowledge I have.
I have a question for when you meet with people when you're like for the first time. Do you just typically go over like the basic chart, or do you go over progressions and returns at the first meeting, or do you wait for that?
That's a good question. I do just the birth chart in the first reading. And if they want me to do transits, progressions, and arcs as the first reading, I will do that with a recommendation that they also get a natal reading. It's a little harder to understand what the dynamic events are in your chart if you don't understand the root chart to begin with. I flexed about that because some people think that you are just trying to gouge them if you insist on a natal reading before a dynamic events reading. Steve and I first waived that if they had read their inner sky report on their birth chart. And since I've waived it, and I will start with a transit as long as people know there may be some comprehension issues. The reason I don't do them all together, and there are astrologers who do, and they must have brain cells outside their bodies. But my brain isn't, I can't handle doing a natal reading and dynamics events reading in the same session. My readings run 2 or 3 hours. And that means I'd be talking for 4 to 6 hours straight. And my brain can't handle that. It just doesn't work. If your brain does as an astrologer, great. But I have to work within my own limitations here. And that's why I don't do long marathon combinations.
Yeah, that seems to me like that would be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, good question. Other questions? Does anybody know who David Hogg is? Okay. Remember when the Marjorie Douglas Stoneman, or maybe it was Stoneman Douglas High School in, was it Parkland, Florida? The, there was a school shooting, and it was, a lot of people died. They don't, if I remember right, this is one of the ones I think was not handled particularly well. And I think it was 17 people died. It may have been 19. And I think it took less than a minute for the shooter to take out all these people. And when the students of this high school formed a group, Never Again MDS, which means Never Again a Marjorie Douglas Stoneman or Stoneman Douglas high school type of shooting. David Hogg was involved in starting that group, and since then, he managed to get himself on the Democratic National Committee. I may be saying that wrong. And he also managed to get himself removed from the Democratic National Committee. He has started a group called Leaders We Deserve. And he is mobilizing young people to vote. Since he got removed from the committee, he's also running for Congress in his own district. He's upset a lot of people because he said that there are Democrats who are no longer working, and they're no longer listening to the people. They're no longer doing a good job, and they should be removed. And more enthusiastic, younger people ought to be brought on. I understand that point of view. And he's what now, 25? Yeah. Tact is not this guy's long suit, but I'm glad there's somebody doing what he's doing. Also, other people in Congress, gun advocates, are, I think, going to have a hard time looking him in the eyes and continuing to support the NRA. At least, I hope I'm not offending somebody by saying these things. I apologize if I am.
What's the NRA?
The National Rifle Association.
Okay.
And they have a huge lobby. They contribute a lot to political campaigns. Generally to people who want to get rid of what gun restrictions we already have.
He's probably onto something.
Yeah.
And he's an Aries.
Yes, he is. He is most definitely an Aries. With a lot of fire. I have 6 points in fire and 5 in earth. So that fire-earth combination, I think I've said to some of you before, tends to be a steamroller. They have a lot of drive and they have a lot of practical smarts. So I'm amazed he got himself onto the DNC, given his age, and I hope he gets elected. We need some people to be firebrands about some things that need to change.
He has a pretty interesting chart.
Mhm.
He's got that mutual reception between Mars and Venus,
Yes, he does.
and a North Node in Cancer. That's at the 29th degree. That's interesting.
Mhm. This is somebody else who came in the world pretty strong, Capricorn South Node.
Mm.
Because the node's retrograde, before this South Node was in Capricorn, it retrograded out of Aquarius into Capricorn. The nodes always move backwards. So he's going to need some of those Capricorn skills and smarts in order to do some of the things that he wants to do. About the sun sextiles Uranus and squares the nodes. So not a very aspected sun. It trines Pluto if we use an 11-degree orb. But the most dignified planet in his chart is the sun. The least is Mercury. We have some interesting asteroids in his chart. Persephone falls right between his Mars and Jupiter. And I would think going to high school at a school that was experiencing that kind of school shooting would feel like hell. It would feel like all of a sudden the underworld had erupted. So David may be somebody who spends some time thinking very carefully about what he wants to fight for Mars and the best ways to fight for it. We also have the asteroid, I'm not sure how to say this, Esculapia in 8 Aquarius, right on, very close to his Neptune. I go up to 2 degrees for asteroids. He was the Roman god of medicine. You've seen a drawing of a staff with 2 snakes swirling up it. You often see that in medical establishments. Snakes represent wisdom. So if we look at his Neptunian identity, I imagine he can provide compassion and healing energy to people who have been through something similar. And it also brings resilience, theoretically. There's a lot we are still learning about asteroids, but I wanted to look at a lot of different techniques today, so that's why I did.
It seems pretty interesting to have both the malefics at the top of his chart conjoined.
Yeah, he sure does. And near the top, and in the house of higher education.
Hmm.
Generally, that refers to universities.
Hmm.
And I'm not terribly surprised to see an 8th house sun here. It usually doesn't manifest in such a severe way. But I've been sort of noticing 8th house Aries suns. I realize we're at time and we need to stop. I have a client who is an 8th house Aries, and she grew up in a funeral home. Her parents were undertakers. So I think there's probably some kind of instinctive caution about the dead. Some cultures have had taboos around care of the dead. So I imagine it might have been a little spooky growing up there, or that her friends were a little leery to come over to a funeral home in order to see her. So she grew up facing death literally and having to be courageous about it every day. And here's an 8th house Aries who survived a horrific shooting and probably felt considerably more mortal at the end of it than he did at the beginning. Okay, you guys have been very patient with me and I appreciate it very much. And I don't have anything on my plate work-wise for the rest of the evening. So if you want to hang out and just talk, fine. If you want to sign out now, that's perfectly okay too. I just wanted to show you, look at everything coming off of David's midheaven. I suspect he will be elected to Congress. Questions?
That was
I'm
great,
glad you-
Jodie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing this.
Thank you.
You're very
That's very
welcome.
interesting.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought his chart up because I had forgotten his name, but I had heard of him. So this is very interesting. It'll be interesting to see where he goes.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see where he goes. And I'm really glad that he decided he was going to get involved in this on the public level and run for office. And I imagine that, you know, that warrior energy went into, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent this happening to any other school. That became a kind of crusade for him.
That ninth house is so interesting with both the malefics there, Jupiter, and it's ruled by Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mars, Venus, yeah, interesting.
Well, you develop this. Ninth house says something about our personal philosophy of life. And these three planets all have something to do with it.
Mm.
So Saturn, you get out of reality what you put into it. Life is not always easy. Life does involve suffering. Life demands some practical, strong responses from us. Mars, we need to be brave. There's a quote from Anais Nin that I really like. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to our courage. So that might be a good motto for David Hogg. And Jupiter, I think that's wanting things to be fair, wanting things to be equitable, and being angry when they're not, Mars, and deciding to go out and do something practical about it, Saturn. And I have no idea what his philosophy of life actually is, but I suspect some of it involves not giving up and not chickening out. Always good advice for Aries, not to chicken out.
I have that natally.
You do?
Mars and Saturn conjunct. I mean, the orb's wider, but and it, different, but um, he'd be very skilled in uh, thinking about taking stuff on. Be very good in like combat type, how to succeed.
Like
Yeah.
practical conflict resolution,
Unbelievable willpower.
problem solving.
Yeah, in a fixed sign. And it's the warrior and the strategist. Did you ever see those old gangster movies? And there was the brain of the outfit who was usually a little sly, weaselly guy. And then the brawn of the outfit who was this great big Wookiee of a guy. Brain and bronze. And it's as if Mars is the brawn and Saturn is the brain in the same person. So being able to think strategically and fight strategically, I think is something he's working on and working with.
He's got that fiery sun and a fiery moon to back it up.
Lots of fire. You know, fire is the biggie, followed by earth. Okay. Anything else?
I need to go, but thank you very much. That was great.
Okay. You're very welcome, Asha Lily. Glad you were here.
Yeah, we'll see you in a fortnight.
Yeah. See me soon. Bye-bye now. Okay.
I have a question for you, Jody, a little off topic, well, kind of on and off.
Sure.
I have a couple people who are wanting me to sit down and go over their chart with them. So could I pick your brain sometime before I do that?
Sure. We can set up a tutoring session for that easily.
Okay.
Definitely.
I have your email. I'll shoot you an email when I have a better sense of my schedule.
Mhm. Okay, great. Yeah. That's something I do is walk people through how to organize a reading.
And I'm just getting started on trying to figure out how to do these for just like friends or coworkers or something. So wanting to get my feet wet in there.
Um, you might start just by doing sun, moon, ascendant blends. If you get those down, I mean, that's the
Good point.
skeleton of a chart.
Okay.
And if you understand the skeleton, you can do somebody a whole lot of good just doing sun, moon, ascendant readings. And later, as you get more confident, you can expand it to include other points or other planets. I started out doing sun, moon, ascendant readings for feedback. That's all I wanted was feedback on the reading. And as I got more used to things, I would do whole chart readings. This was 1983, remember, for $5 and feedback. And you just sort of expand what you're doing until you feel a lot more comfortable with it. Sometimes people study astrology and don't take the extra step of founding a practice because either they don't do the memory work. You have to have some keywords and key phrases for every sign, every planet, every house, every aspect, and the nodes of the moon. Just in there, solidly in your brain. And people who don't do the memory work get a little lost when they're doing a reading. You can't do a reading and look at a planet and think, oh gosh, what did Uranus mean again? I'm sorry, I need to go look this up. You need to have those keywords and phrases. And at that point, I think you can start doing the whole chart if you want. The other thing that stops students from founding a practice is they have a whole lot of knowledge, but they just don't start doing readings at all. They don't put it into practice. And it can be nerve-wracking. The first year I did readings, I left every reading with my heart pounding and my palms sweating and my throat dry. You know, I'm introverted and it was just hard to jump into somebody's skin like that. And it took a lot of developing people skills I wasn't necessarily born with. But you will learn more that first full year you do readings than you did in almost all of your study beforehand. I feel kind of sacrilegious saying that because it's good to do some studying. It's necessary before you start doing readings, but it's when you actually start doing them and you see pattern after pattern after pattern. Some of them repeat and you learn a lot about it. Some of them show up, once in a practice. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And one reason people have been doing this for so long are pretty fluid is we've done the memory work and we've had a lot of practice. That's the only difference between a professional astrologer and a student. They've done some memory work and they were brave enough to start. Okay, good question.
Thank you.
Welcome. Anything else? This is your time. Okay, well, I will see you guys next time, and you have my email if you think of anything you want to ask about, either from here or someplace else. And I know I'm going to see Teresa in class. I hope to see everybody in class at some point. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're recording.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It was nice to meet you.
It was very nice to meet you.
You live in California,
I'm in San Diego County, California. Yeah,
and you've been an astrologer for quite some time, I presume.
since 1983. I've been studying it since I was a kid, but then I started my practice in May of '83. So that's 42 years.
Yeah. What year were you born?
1956.
Right on. I'm one of my best friends is Marsha Fox.
Oh yeah, yeah. Marshall
I,
went. Hmm.
yeah, I'll tell her about you. And I met Christine Ahrens through Marsha,
Mhm.
and I was born uh, during a solar eclipse, same as Christine. So that's how I met her. And you teach at the school?
Yeah, I teach at the International Academy of Astrology, Astro College.
Yeah. It was so refreshing to hear you go through that. It was pleasant. It was so wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear
Just,
that.
yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very, very welcome. Yeah, I teach here and I do a chart delineation session about every 6 weeks.
Right on. Well, have a great weekend. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
too, Matthew.
All right.
Hope our paths
Have a good
cross.
evening.
Okay, you
All
too.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.